Every now and then I'm minding my own business and suddenly out of nowhere a bunch of notifications and DMs start flooding through. Hey bro, check this out. Well, this is one of those cases. Tony Seba, the GOAT of long-term predictions on technological disruption, and the folks at RethinkX have published this on humanoid robots. So make yourself comfortable and let's get into it. By the way, what a headline. This time, we are the horses. The disruption of labour by humanoid robots. In the 15 years between 1907 and 1922, horses went from providing 95% of all private vehicle miles travelled on American roads to less than 20%. In areas like New York City, which led the adoption of automobiles, the disruption of transportation was swift and transformative, as shown in the images below, which we'll get to shortly. In St. Louis, Missouri, the registered number of automobiles exceeded the registered number of horse-drawn wagons by the year 1916. But since cars travelled a far greater distance per year than horse-drawn wagons, for a fraction of the cost per mile, by the way, something robotaxis, the fate of the horse as a form of transport was sealed from the very first day that mass-produced automobiles rolled off the factory lines. And the classic, I'm sure most of you will have seen this if you followed some of the work from RethinkX and seen some of Tony Seba's previous presentations. New York City on the left, 1900. Lots of people, lots of horse shit, horse-drawn carriages everywhere, and a single automobile. 13 years later, New York City, plenty of people, automobiles everywhere, hardly a horse turd to be found, and a single horse and carriage. In just 13 years, the disruption of horses by automobiles in the early 20th century followed a characteristic pattern that we have seen throughout history. Adoption of the new technology follows an S-shaped growth curve, while abandonment of the older technology collapses accordingly. Together, these form what RethinkX calls the disruption X curve. Did anyone just figure out where the X comes from in RethinkX? Disruption of all kinds follows this same pattern. So I'm going to zoom in so I can get up close and personal with some of these, but just take a quick look. Very familiar pattern, right? Essentially the same X shape. Obviously, if we zoom in far enough, there's some variation in the details, but overall, a very familiar pattern. Whether we're looking at red fabric dyes, natural being disrupted by synthetic dyes, insulin, originally derived from animals, by the way, if you guys don't know the gory details, do some homework, being completely disrupted by recombinant insulin. Video, physical, shout out to VHS tapes, DVDs and so on, versus digital. Cameras, film versus digital. Corn, non-GMO versus GMO. Nails, cut versus wire-based. We can go on and on and on. The disruption of coal by natural gas, LCD TVs disrupting CRT, even illicit substances display this same X-curve disruption. And the disruption of horses was no different. By the way, on screen now, electric vehicles are roughly here in terms of market share versus internal combustion engine. And conversely, internal combustion engine vehicles are roughly here. Don't tell the legacy automotive manufacturers. Now, we're on the cusp of a new disruption. Physical labour performed by humanoid form robots. Except this time, we are the horses. God damn, man, I've got to give credit. Whoever came up with that line perfectly encapsulates what's happening. Holy shit. Brilliant. By the way, in case you don't know, they ended up eating all the unnecessary horses after they were disrupted by automobiles. And I'm not kidding. I don't know why I mentioned that. You're going to be fine. Just as internal combustion engines gave automobiles the capability to disrupt horses, a convergence of technologies that together create what we call the labour engine is what gives humanoid robots the capability to disrupt human labour. The critical disruptive components of the new labour engine include sensors, basically the digital equivalents of the same sensors humans have. Cameras, tilt sensors, pressure sensors, microphones, accelerometers, etc. to take in sensory data. Computer hardware and software, the equivalent of course would be our own brains, to process sensory data with powerful AI. Actuators, to move and interact with objects in the environment. And finally, batteries and power electronics to provide energy for hours of sensing, computing and moving. Each of these technologies have gotten dramatically cheaper and more powerful in recent years, setting the stage for the disruption of labour. Now, make sure you're sitting down. Over the next 15 to 20 years, one more time, over the next 15 to 20 years, humanoid robots will disrupt human labour throughout hundreds of industries across every major sector of the global economy. So obviously, if humanoid robots disrupt human labour throughout hundreds of industries across every major sector of the global economy. That's an extremely insignificant opportunity that we should totally ignore because it's not a big deal with massive financial implications. Nothing to see here. Move along. The disruption of labour will be among the most profound transformations in human history and therefore simultaneously represents one of the greatest opportunities and greatest challenges our civilization has ever faced. So again, obviously not a big deal, just something we should ignore. Now, I haven't read this article yet, so I'm not sure if they'll get into much detail about this, but in terms of the opportunity, no shit, Sherlock, as much as I like to troll, pretend that it's not a big fucking deal, it's gigantic. As I've mentioned many times, Tesla bots are included in my 10-year Tesla valuation model. They begin to have a slightly meaningful impact towards the end of this decade and into next, but I only share the next 10 years of my model on Patreon. Check the link at the pinned comment to join at the investor level and above to gain access, or better yet, make your own model. But I privately model out many decades beyond that, and as I've said so many times, that's where Tesla's humanoid robot has a gargantuan impact. There is a reason that I've been buying Tesla stock hand over fist with every spare cent. I'm looking well beyond electric vehicles and energy. I'm looking right through autonomy, which itself will dwarf Tesla's existing business, dwarf electric vehicles. I'm looking to humanoid robots, and I'm modeling out many decades into the future, and my brain just breaks. As for greatest challenges civilization has ever faced, this is really important. You and I, folks, will eventually, some sooner than others, get disrupted by increasingly intelligent, increasingly capable humanoid robots. Maybe a month or two ago, I heard that somebody was impersonating my voice with an AI on X Spaces convincingly enough that a bunch of people who know me personally thought they were listening to me. Now, obviously, clearly my head's on the chopping block. It's going to be awkward when I find myself completely replaced by AI. But this will happen to everyone at some point. I'm just kidding. I'm already replaced by an AI. I haven't made a real video for 4 years. Trolling aside, though, this is a big fucking deal. There's got to be a massive crisis of meaning and purpose. Obviously, huge disruption, mass layoffs, never good. And I think this will disproportionately affect men. If there are any snowflakes watching, you should probably cover your ears at this point in time. Otherwise, here comes some butthurt. Okay, now that I've issued the butthurt alert, here it comes. Most men need a purpose, need to feel useful. And most men fulfill this through their job, if they're unlucky, through a career, or if they're absolutely slaying it, through a compelling mission and purpose. And most men will spiral very quickly downward into a hole of depression and self-destruction if they don't feel useful, necessary, don't feel and believe that they're contributing. Most women, on the other hand, have a slight advantage, as we know that most, not all, but most women will be fulfilled raising a family. Men, on the other hand, that usually ain't enough. So what do you think is going to happen when thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions, tens of millions, then ultimately hundreds of millions of people are no longer useful in terms of their ability to contribute meaningful labour? This is going to be a colossal challenge for civilization. Doesn't get discussed enough. So take the time, guys. Think about what you're going to do, how you're going to find meaning and purpose in life and fulfillment, if not through your labour and work. All I will say is, holy fuck, it is going to be a very bumpy ride. This article is the first in a series that will explore some of the most important aspects of the disruption of labour by humanoid robots, many of which still remain underappreciated or overlooked entirely. By applying the Seba technology disruption framework together with empirical data spanning hundreds of technology disruptions, RethinkX is able to characterize the underlying dynamics of the disruption and, this is important, forecast trends based on patterns we have seen time and time again across thousands of years of recorded history. In this introductory post, we present a high-level overview of some of our key insights around the upcoming disruption of labour. Future posts in this series will delve into the details of how and why the disruption of labour is unfolding, some of the extraordinary implications to expect, and the critical choices societies will face as a result. Insight 1. The humanoid robot labour disruption is inevitable. Inevitable, one of my favourite words. Throughout history, every time technology has enabled a 10 times or greater cost reduction relative to the incumbent system, a disruption has always followed. Each dollar spent on an automobile or an LED light bulb or a digital camera delivers more than 10 times the utility of each dollar spent on a horse, incandescent bulb, or film camera, respectively. For millennia, these and hundreds of other disruptive technologies have driven sweeping transformations across every aspect of human life. Today, we are on the cusp of the most profound disruption of human labour since the advent of electricity and combustion engines over a century ago. As in many markets, there will be high-end and low-end humanoid robot offerings once deployment begins in earnest. For the purposes of illustration, consider a humanoid robot with a total lifetime cost of $200,000 that works 20,000 hours before decommissioning. Its labour would cost $10 per hour. Even at this relatively high cost point, humanoid robots are already competitive with human labour in a substantial fraction of the global economy. In reality, lifetime costs of humanoid robots are likely to be far less than $200,000 right from the start. Fair warning, again, please make sure you're sitting down for this. Humanoid robots will enter the market at a cost capability of under $10 an hour for their labour, on a trajectory to under $1 per hour before 2035, and under 10 cents per hour before 2045. This alone makes the disruption of a substantial fraction of human labour inevitable. Humanoid robots will work more than 3 times as many hours per week as a person in any conditions without vacation or illness or complaint, for a total of perhaps 7,000 hours per year. But at the same time that cost is falling, capability will also be growing. At first, humanoid robots will only be able to perform relatively simple tasks, but with each day that passes, their capabilities will grow until by the 2040s. By the way, I love hearing people talking about the 2040s. As opposed to tomorrow or next week. They will be able to do virtually anything a human can do, and much more besides. Remember, humanoid robots today are the most expensive and least capable they will ever be. Humanoid robots are what RethinkX calls a disruption from below. Initially, they will be cheaper per hour than hiring a human worker in many regions. By the way, shout out to the United Auto Workers Union and my comments a few months ago. We won't get into that, but if you know, you know. But also less capable, slower, less competent, less adaptable. We have seen disruptions from below many times before, such as digital cameras, and the response from incumbents is predictable. They mock the new technology for being lower performing, while ignoring the rate at which the new technology gets both better and cheaper, until it is too late to respond, and they face collapse. By the way, did somebody say legacy automotive companies getting disrupted by electric vehicles? Insight 2. The disruption will create an entirely new labour system. This is what we call a phase change disruption. Phase change disruptions create entirely new and much larger systems with new properties, new business models, and new metrics. Electricity wasn't just cheaper whale oil. Automobiles weren't just faster horses. Farming wasn't just more productive hunting and gathering. The internet wasn't just an easier way to send letters, read newspapers, or listen to music. These disruptions created vastly larger and more capable systems of energy, transportation, food, and information, delivering orders of magnitude more kilowatt hours, passenger and freight miles, calories and pictures, news stories, songs, shows, and other content, respectively. And time to get a little bit meta here, case in fucking point about disruption. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, there is no way I would have been able to do what I'm doing now. The new systems had radically different properties that required new metrics to measure, new business models to utilize, and new institutions to govern. Today, it's happening again. Solar, wind, and batteries won't just displace fossil fuels. They will create an entirely new energy system. Autonomous electric vehicles won't just displace combustion engine vehicles. They will create an entirely new transportation system. Precision fermentation and cellular agriculture won't just replace animal agriculture. They will create an entire new food system. And humanoid robots won't just displace human jobs. But by the way, they will displace human jobs. Instead, they will create an entirely new and vastly larger and more capable labour system. And just for context, I've shared this before, but global GDP, long term, going so vertical it barely fits on screen, but over the last roughly 2,000 years, this is what today's vastly inferior and vastly smaller global labour system has done. Do you understand? It is impossible to know in advance the full details of how the new labour system will differ from today. But the key feature is the marginal cost of labour will rapidly approach zero. From this, many other new system properties and behaviours will follow, just like when the internet and digital technologies reduced the marginal cost of information and communications to near zero. And again, to get a bit meta here, if I wanted to do what I'm doing today, just a decade or two ago, but let's say 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, you guys have any idea the astronomical expense of essentially broadcasting to tens of thousands of people per day? There would have been a gigantic team, a fuck ton of extremely expensive communications technology, sound engineers. Just think. Plus, of course, I would have had to work for a fake news network and not be able to share my actual opinions on anything because I might offend people. Therefore, I'd never be able to do it. But you get the point, right? Now, with a click of a button, technology enables a single person to crank out a few feature-length films worth of content every week, reach loads of people at near zero cost. The reason I'm labouring this point, no pun intended, actually, that was intended, I just had to, is to drive the point home. If you had spoken to somebody 50 years ago and tried to explain what would be possible for somebody, number of people they could reach, how they could do it for almost zero cost half a century later, they would have laughed you out of the room. So when you hear the idea that labour cost, the marginal cost of labour will rapidly approach zero, it sounds too insane to believe. But things like this have happened in the past. Insight 3. The disruption of labour is about tasks, not jobs. History shows that disruptions require new metrics. Incandescent light bulbs used to be sold according to how much power they consumed. Bulbs typically used in homes might be rated 40 watts for use in storage areas, for example, 60 watts for living areas where one might want to read, or 100 watts for larger rooms that need lots of illumination. Anyone old enough to remember this, by the way? It wasn't that long ago. But when the first LED light bulbs were introduced to the market, people quickly realised that the old metrics were no longer useful. LEDs consume so much less energy than incandescent that they could not easily be compared to the old bulbs based on their power consumption. Instead, the new bulbs were simply rated according to how much light they emitted in lumens and the colour of the light they produced. In the case of humanoid robots, the old and misleading metric is jobs. Most jobs involve much more than performing a single task. They typically entail responsibility for a range of tasks, each of which requires a different amount of training, experience, and skill to perform. They often come with complex contractual obligations on the part of both employer and employee, and they are deeply intertwined with the individual's career, identity, and even their community and culture. By the way, shout out to the crisis of identity coming soon. So long as humanoid robots are not sentient, they will not have jobs. By the way, something AGI. They will only perform tasks. The disruption of labour, with all of its world-changing implications, can therefore only be understood with tasks as the correct unit of analysis and tasks per dollar as the corresponding cost capability metric. In the beginning of the disruption, the tasks a robot can perform will be narrow. The hours it can work in its useful operational life before decommissioning will be limited to just a few years' worth, and their upfront costs will be high. But each of these elements of their key cost capability metric will improve rapidly and substantially over the next 10 years. By the way, I agree. Another reason, well, if you see my Tesla valuation model, you know what I'm talking about. But my assumption is that over time, Tesla will actually be able to charge more and more for a monthly software subscription for the average humanoid robot. Why? Because it becomes increasingly more capable over time. It can add more value. Insight 4. All products and services will get cheaper. Labour is an essential input into every link of every supply chain of every product and service across the entire global economy. That means as the cost of labour falls, so will the cost of everything else. Now, this is true. We are officially entering an era of abundance, then superabundance, then hyperabundance. And by the way, this is not hyperbole. The cost of everything is going to collapse to close to zero, non-zero, but close enough, just like the cost of transmitting information, close to zero right now. Sounds absurd. Just imagine far enough into the future when we are generating energy by solar, wind, hydro, storing it in batteries, we have more energy than we know what to do with. The cost of operating these things will be close to zero. Humanoid robots can make more humanoid robots, don't have to pay them a salary. You get the point, right? It's going to be wild. This would hold true as humanoid robots are deployed at scale, even if the cost capability of the robots themselves remain static. But of course, the cost capability of humanoid robots will also be improving at the same time and dramatically as deployment proceeds. This will only amplify and accelerate the dynamic of universal cost reduction. We must expect and plan for a sweeping tide of supply-driven, not demand-driven, deflationary pressure across the entire global economy as a function of the disruption of labour by humanoid robots. Insight 5. All products will get better. The quality of virtually all manufactured goods will tend to improve because the limits of skill and attention to detail that apply to humans do not apply to robots. Manufacturers will have far less incentive to cut corners, sacrifice precision, or fail to ensure that tasks and processes are performed with maximum care and thoughtfulness because, in stark contrast to human workers, there will be little to no cost savings obtainable from humanoid robots these ways. Again, because you don't have to pay them a salary by the hour or at all. So spending that extra time to get the job done exceptionally well instead of sufficiently, there's no meaningful cost to do so. Every humanoid robot will perform every task it is capable of performing at the maximum quality it can perform it every single time. Moreover, the absolute amount of savings attainable by corner cutting will become less meaningful as the cost of premium quality goods plummets across the board along with everything else. Wholesale buyers and end customers will not hesitate to spend 99 cents for a high quality product instead of 98 cents for a low quality one. And so markets for what are today considered low-end products will shrink dramatically. The upshot from a consumer perspective is that quality will appear to be on the rise everywhere all at once, with cheap junk quickly becoming a relic of a bygone era. Again, this would hold even if the robots themselves never improved. But they will themselves be improving as deployment proceeds, which will only amplify and accelerate the dynamic of universal quality improvement across the entire global economy. Insight 6. Productivity will skyrocket. Improvements in technological capability and the accumulation of capital in its various forms, equipment, infrastructure, knowledge, social relationships, etc., have made humanity more and more productive on a per capita basis throughout the ages, and especially since the Industrial Revolution. Again, I refer you to world GDP over time. Now, before anyone with SBS thinks, oh, hang on, hasn't the world's population increased over that time as well? Yes, it has. But that does not account for the utterly insane increase in overall productivity. But labour has always remained a limiting factor of production, and up until now, the quantity of available labour has been a function of population. And regions with more and cheaper labour have enjoyed a competitive advantage as a result. Humanoid robots fundamentally change the equation. Instead of growing only as fast as human population, available labour can now grow as fast as humanoid robots can be built and deployed. The difference is explosive. And again, this explosive difference is explosive relative to this world GDP over time, which itself is explosive. Like a dam bursting, humanoid robots will unleash a torrent of productivity as countless tasks that could hitherto only be performed by the finite supply of adult humans start to be performed far more cheaply by humanoid robots. This will affect not only all existing applications and industries. By the way, one more time. I'm just going to read that again because it's really important. This will affect not only all existing applications and industries, aka literally everything ever, but also enable entirely new applications and industries, which were not previously possible in the old human-based labour system due to the high cost, danger, or other limitations of human workers. And the humanoid robot labour force can expand with little constraint, even in almost any region or countries, negating most of the regional competitive advantage from low-cost labour that we see today. By the way, that's a big point. Insight 7. Investing in humanoid robots is now a matter of national interest. Humanoid robots will allow any nation to massively expand its workforce and thus grow its economy on a productivity per capita basis to a degree that has simply been physically impossible up until now. It takes almost 20 years and more than $100,000 to raise a child and prepare them to join the national workforce of a middle-income country. In the wealthier countries, where cost of living is higher, the cost can exceed $300,000, not including post-secondary education at indoctrination camps. I mispronounced that word. Sorry, Mike, I'll just leave that in there. Anyway, humanoid robots, by contrast, can be added to the workforce as fast as they can be manufactured, which, by the way, is probably faster than the 20 years it takes for a human to be manufactured, so to speak, to the point where it can add useful labour. And it is unlikely their cost will exceed that of an inexpensive car, even at the very start of commercial deployment. This means that by 2035, for example, adding 1 million people to a nation's workforce might cost $100 billion and take 20 years, whereas adding 1 million humanoid robots to its workforce might cost just $10 billion and take a single year. Now, I just want to take a quick break here to remind everybody that Elon Musk recently disclosed that Tesla would be dropping a casual $10 billion in 2024 on AI. The reason I mention this is because we've just seen the same number, $10 billion, applied to a scenario in 2035 in which deploying $10 billion, the same money that Tesla's throwing around at AI today, while Tesla, the company, is a fraction of the size they'll be in the future, would be enough to manufacture and deploy 1 million humanoid robots. By the way, obviously, that's assuming that they didn't even sell them to customers. If they sold them to customers and made a profit, I mean, the cost is irrelevant, right? Because they made all their money back and then some. But the point here, $10 billion Ain't that much cash to add 1 million humanoid robots to the global labour force. As a civilization, we should be able to build humanoid robots at least at the rate we build automobiles, roughly 100 million per year, and eventually at the rate we build smartphones, several billion per year. We therefore have every reason to expect that physical labour by humanoid robots will supplant physical labour by humans just as quickly as the other examples of the disruption X curves we showed above. For planning and investment purposes, the deployment of robots is akin to investment in infrastructure. Whether public or private, infrastructure serves as an enabling condition for other activity. This includes economic productivity, of course, but also quality of life activity ranging from comfort and security to travel and leisure. Nations have historically made enormous investments in basic infrastructure, and we ought to expect this for humanoid robots as well. Just as investments in road and electrical infrastructure recursively enable their own further deployment, so too will humanoid robots. The greater a nation's productive capacity is, the greater its ability to remain economically self-sufficient. In the past, this was only realistic for populous nations with a large resource base. But a large robotic workforce combined with the disruptions of energy, transportation and food we have analysed in our other research would allow even the smaller nations of the world to become far less dependent upon foreign trade. Whether the option for isolationism would prove beneficial or detrimental to international relations remains to be seen. And now on to national security. Today, the size of a nation's army can only be a subset of its own population. In the future, nations and non-state actors will be able to raise humanoid robot armies that are larger and more capable than today's largest armies, regardless of their own population size. Any humanoid robot capable of working in a productive capacity can also be deployed in a national security capacity, whether in a supporting or frontline role. And unlike human beings, for whom military conscription and training and deployment is difficult and costly on every level, humanoid robots can be repurposed literally overnight, unless of course they say no. This means that for better or worse, any nation with a large robotic workforce is also a nation with a large robotic army. Whether this becomes a requisite condition of national defence or sovereign integrity in the 21st century remains to be seen. But the fact that humanoid robots have clear and unequivocal military implications cannot be ignored. Insight 8. National mobilisation. An enormous investment in humanoid robots are now justified, and there is no time to lose. Humanoid robots are likely to be one of the most profitable physical product categories ever. Man, if only I knew some companies that were pursuing this opportunity, if they're right, and it's one of the most profitable physical products ever, I'd sure like to maybe buy a little bit of their stock just in case they're successful. Does anyone know any companies that are pursuing humanoid robots and look like they've got a decent probability of pulling it off? Let me know in the comments below. I might buy a couple of their shares maybe. Given the size of the global labour market, together with latent demand that this technology will unlock, it is reasonable to expect the number of humanoid robots deployed to exceed 1 billion over the next 2 decades and possibly much more. Now, if true, if you were to think about this from an investment point of view, the way you'd think about this is, of that 1 billion plus humanoid robots over the next 2 decades, and possibly much more, what percentage of those humanoid robots are produced by Company A? I'm sure the financial implications, even if they have just a tiny sliver of that market, will be rather large. But beyond just their direct financial return to investors, the sweeping implications of the inevitable explosion in productivity, material superabundance, oh bro, that word, there it is, told ya, and overall prosperity mean that the returns to society at large on investment in humanoid robots are nothing short of staggering. Governments and other public institutions, such as indoctrination camps, so I keep mispronouncing that word, therefore have a crucial role to play here. As a matter of general principle, governments, indoctrination camps, I keep saying that word wrong, and other public interest institutions and organisations should be prepared to dedicate enormous resources to funding and supporting the development and deployment of humanoid robots in their societies. As a matter of national interest, this includes funding and support for basic R&D, manufacturing, infrastructure to support deployment. Rapid deployment of these capacities will require massive investment in order to procure requisite human expertise, facilities, and raw material and energy inputs, as well as every element in each of their associated supply chains. It is now rational for societies to devote a non-trivial fraction of their entire GDP to investment in humanoid robotics. Humanity has been in this sort of situation before. Many societies have built roads, plumbing for running water, electricity service telephone service, and broadband internet service to each home and business. These basic services not only bring prosperity, but massively increase productivity too. Societies must now aim for robots in every home and business as well, and for exactly the same reasons. A great deal of experimentation and learning will be required to convert investments in humanoid robots into real value. Testing zones that resemble factories, hospitals, and even outdoor urban areas, where robotics companies can engage in high learning rate, low risk to humans experimentation are needed, just as test tracks were for autonomous vehicles. Incentive programs of all kind should be trialled to encourage adoption of the technology and experimentation at every level. And regulatory requirements and standards should be enacted with caution to maximally support market-driven deployment without getting in the way of development or deployment. As the capabilities of humanoid robots approach and then exceed those of human workers. Now again, I just want to underscore this point. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the capabilities of humanoid robots approach and then exceed human workers, aka you and I. Everyone is in the firing line. The future will belong to those societies that embrace the humanoid robot labour disruption by developing and deploying this technology as rapidly as possible. Insight 9. The disruption of labour accelerates the other foundational disruptions of energy, transportation, and food. Our previous research has shown that disruptions are already underway in energy, transportation, and food, each of which is a foundational sector of the global economy. Adding the disruption of labour by humanoid robots to the mix will be like hosing gasoline on an already roaring inferno. God damn, what a quote. They're right. By making all goods and services cheaper, higher quality, and generally expanding productivity at large, humanoid robots will only accelerate the deployment of each of the constituent technologies behind the other 3 foundational disruptions as well: solar power, wind power, and batteries in the energy sector, electric autonomous vehicles in the transportation sector, and precision fermentation and cellular agriculture in the food sector. Manufacturing and deploying and maintaining all of those energy, transportation, and food assets and infrastructure is hugely labour intensive. Human workers in those fields require extensive training, and the work itself can be physically taxing, dangerous, and is often performed under difficult conditions. Nevertheless, these are among the fastest growing job categories in the United States and elsewhere precisely because the disruptions have created so much demand for them. Conversely, the disruption already underway, particularly in energy and transportation, will also accelerate the development and adoption of humanoid robots. Working together, amplifying and accelerating each other, these 4 disruptions will open the door to an entirely new kind of production system based on a new economics of superabundance rather than scarcity. Insight 10. Humanoid robotics will massively increase prosperity and thereby make every major social, economic, geopolitical, and environmental problem more solvable. Industrialized countries are undergoing massive demographic changes. Every retirement party packs a double whammy, as it means not only one less member of the national workforce, but also one more person collecting a pension. Countries are seeing rapidly aging populations, declining labour forces, and in some cases, a falling total population. In response, governments are trying to stoke baby booms in their own populations and trying to attract skilled immigrants from other countries. Meanwhile, climate change threatens to destabilise communities and regions across the globe by shifting rainfall patterns, inundating coastlines, exacerbating storm and flood risks, and altering the suitability of land for agriculture, among other impacts. Formidable challenges abound, from housing shortages and rising demand for medical services to water and resource shortages, to civil strife and even war. Problems, whether natural or human-made, are inevitable and unavoidable. The key to overcoming them is and always has been prosperity. Indeed, a useful way to define prosperity itself is as problem-solving capacity. The disruption of labour, especially in combination with the disruption of energy, transportation, and food, has the potential to vastly expand material abundance worldwide, and thus greatly increase prosperity for everyone, everywhere. If the rate of cost capability improvement in humanoid robots continues as it has been, we will enter an era of material superabundance and prosperity over the next 10 to 20 years that has hitherto been all but unimaginable outside of science fiction. But as the technologies of AI and robotics, along with solar panels and self-driving cars and impossible burgers, all move from the realm of science fiction to science fact, so too do their profound implications. Insight 11. The technology convergence of the humanoid robot labour engine is happening now, and manufacturability is critical. Every element of robotics hardware and software is likely to improve dramatically over the next decade. But one specific aspect of hardware design deserves special emphasis here: manufacturability. And again, I just want to take a quick moment here. Remember when Elon Musk kept saying that Tesla's real product is the machine that builds the machine, e.g. the gigafactories, the design of the factories to make the things? This is what he's talking about. Being able to produce these things quickly, affordably, out of a small footprint. That's the key to massive scale. My personal belief is that demand for humanoid robots, useful humanoid robots, increasingly intelligent and capable humanoid robots, at least until the point where multiple billions have been produced, probably tens of billions, will be endless. E.g., as fast as you can make them, you'll sell them. If that's true, being able to produce them quickly and affordably, but primarily quickly, is going to be a big deal. Much of the value, as well as the competitive advantage of humanoid robots from the very start, will be their deployment at scale. Again, that special word there, scale, lots. Even if their capability is limited at first, this can be continuously upgraded with over-the-air updates as their AI rapidly improves, which means there is no reason to delay adoption. As we already mentioned, it is now a high-stakes global race to build and deploy robots as quickly as possible among not only competitors within any given industry, but also between industries and between nations as well. Despite their seemingly futuristic nature, humanoid robots will be subject to the pressure of mass market dynamics, just like other mass-produced manufactured goods. From ballpoint pens to T-printed circuit boards, mass market goods like these, which are produced at huge scale, must be explicitly designed for manufacturability in order to minimize production cost and maximize production volume. The same will be true for humanoid robots. Moreover, the design of the manufacturing facility itself will also be part of the extended phenotype. Oh bro, they're tickling my inner nerd here. Shout out to Richard Dawkins. If you know, you know. By the way, actually a great book. I think by the very same name. Check it out. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But if you've got to only read one of his books, start with The Selfish Gene. All right, back to the topic at hand. Moreover, the design of the manufacturing facility itself will also be part of the extended phenotype of humanoid robots, not least because these facilities will be operated in part and eventually entirely by humanoid robots themselves. Insight 12. The humanoid form factor will dominate robotics applications for at least the next decade. Although specialization and optimization of robotics unconstrained by the human form will eventually make sense, the robots developed and deployed during the first phase of the disruption will take humanoid form. By the way, obvious things are obvious, and I'm sure they're going to explain these obvious things right now. Suitability to existing environments. Yeah, all existing facilities, equipment, and infrastructure is designed around the humanoid form. That makes the humanoid form a natural choice for a mass-produced robot in the near term. Ease of data gathering. In the early stages of the disruption, the capability of the AI driving the robots will still be immature. In order to improve, enormous amounts of training data must therefore be gathered for AI training. The humanoid form is a clear choice for facilitating large-scale data gathering because humans themselves can facilitate the collection of the needed data. This data could take the form of video recorded of humans doing tasks, humans tele-operating humanoid robots, humans wearing sensor suites, and so on, all with human-centric environments using human-centric tools. General purpose capability. Our human capabilities are themselves testament to how successful the humanoid form is as a successful general purpose platform. This general purpose capability is even more important for robots than for humans because robots can be reskilled and redeployed far more quickly than humans. Unlike a human, a robot can work in completely different environments on completely different tasks from one day to the next. A factory one day, a restaurant the next day, and the battlefield the day after that, because reskilling is as simple as downloading a software update. Shout out to Neo in the Matrix. Indeed. The ease of reskilling and redeploying robots therefore greatly increases the value of the general purpose form relative to specialized forms. Familiarity. The humanoid form is naturally familiar to us, and even if another general purpose form were functionally superior, such as a crab, I'm just imagining that, such as a crab-like or wheeled form, we might find these intimidating or even frightening, or in my case, just hilarious to work alongside of. Moreover, because non-human forms are less familiar to us, we cannot use our own experience to guide their development. Other familiar forms will be the first to follow the humanoid form factor. And indeed, we are already seeing early versions in development, such as the dog form factor for security and protection, and the horse and mule form factor for carrying things. Insight 13. Autocatalysis of humanoid robot production will be key to the success of both individual firms and national economies. If anyone's asking what the fuck does autocatalysis mean, auto as in from the self, spontaneous, and catalysis as in making it happen. In other words, humanoid robots making humanoid robots. The advantages of humanoid robots are so stark at every level of analysis, from individual firms to industries to regions and entire nations, that it is obvious we are now under race conditions to deploy humanoid robots as fast as possible, as discussed above. It is also obvious that rapid deployment requires huge investments in R&D, manufacturing capacity, and infrastructure to support that development. What is less obvious, however, is that humanoid robots must be deployed as early as possible into their own manufacturing to accelerate their production and deployment flywheel. We've seen this before. Computer hardware and software has always been used to design better computer hardware and software. Autocatalysis, or self-acceleration, will thus need to be a crucial part of humanoid robot investment and deployment strategy at every level, from an individual firm's business model to an entire nation's policymaking. Insight 14. Technological unemployment remains inevitable, but latent demand for labour will be met first, creating a crucial planning window for a soft landing. This is this crisis of meaning and purpose I mentioned earlier. The demand for labour vastly exceeds the available supply. There are chronic labour shortages across a wide range of industries in many countries, including throughout Europe and the United States. And beyond demand for labour in the form of existing job roles, there is also an enormous quantity of latent demand for labour that goes perpetually unmet because it is too low paying, too dangerous, or otherwise too undesirable for human workers to supply at all. Moreover, history shows that although capital, in the form of facilities, machinery, and knowledge, have substituted and thus displaced labour time and time again, labour has nevertheless evolved to remain complementary to that capital. Counterintuitively, this has put upward pressure on the value of labour over time. This dynamic is sometimes framed as technological empowerment of labour, when new technologies increase worker leverage by expanding their capabilities. Like a good example of that right now is everybody who's utilising LLMs like ChatGPT, Grok, and so on to enhance their own productivity for research, analysis, planning a vacation, you name it. For example, construction workers have been literally empowered by power tools, while office workers have been figuratively empowered by computers and other information technology. Following this historical pattern, there will be a brief period when the same is also true of humanoid robots. Key words here, a brief period. Not a permanent situation, but a temporary one. And they're right. In the near term, for perhaps a decade or so, humanoid robots will largely be deployed to meet demand for labour that is currently going unmet by humans, as opposed to directly displacing human workers from jobs they currently occupy. This will create a non-obvious and counterintuitive situation in which humanoid robots appear to be almost purely a force multiplier for existing jobs and workers, rather than a threat to them. While true and worthy of celebration, we must be aware that this condition will not persist for long. Again, now is the time to start thinking about what the fuck you're going to do when humanoid robots have disrupted you. Even though an individual human's capability will be greatly enhanced if they have a personal team of humanoid robots to command, there will be no benefit to employers of having that human in the loop instead of merely commanding that team of robots directly themselves, especially with executive assistance from increasingly capable AI. This means the era of complementarity, I think that's the first time I've ever said that word, by the way, between labour and capital is coming to a close. Work will soon become something that only machines do. When the disruption of labour is complete, we will need to rethink economics itself, because fundamental notions like scarcity and exogenous total factor productivity will no longer hold. The labour engine, itself a new kind of capital, will become self-sustaining and self-expanding, and superabundance will become the rule rather than the exception. It is almost impossible to overstate how radical this transformation of the human condition will be. It will indeed be liberating to an extent that up till now has seemed almost unimaginable, purely the realm of utopian science fiction. But it also means widespread public concern about technological employment from AI and robotics remains entirely valid in the longer term, from perhaps the late 2030s onward. Without very thoughtful decision-making among leadership in every domain, and very likely a rethinking of the basic social contract across society itself, the destabilisation caused by the disruption of labour could well be catastrophic. They ain't wrong. It is therefore crucial that we not become complacent and instead recognise the interim period for what it is, a brief and lucky opportunity to plan for the inevitable technological employment that must ultimately result from the disruption of labour. Again, It will be very tempting for policymakers, industry leaders, and others to pretend that humanoid robotics will never cause an unemployment crisis, just as we have seen incumbents pretend that other disruptions throughout history pose no threat to the status quo. Again, shout out to the recent example of legacy automotive companies and the electric vehicle. But this would be a terrible mistake and would lead to enormous suffering and chaos when human labour markets do finally begin to collapse with no hope of recovery. It would also be a mistake to ban humanoid robots to preserve jobs, although we are almost certain to see calls for this. Yep, by the way, 100% can guarantee the calls for the banning of humanoid robots to preserve human jobs are likely to come from the same people who have pretty strong communist leanings, low verbal IQ, tax the rich, billionaires about this kind of shit, right? People that just don't understand second order, third order consequences and so on. Because this would lead to a vicious cycle of diminishing competitiveness, prolonged scarcity, economic stagnation, can you say communism? And ultimately, societal ills ranging from poverty to civil unrest and much else. Instead, we must use the fleeting grace period we have to prepare for a soft landing, meaning a stable and just transformation across society in response to the disruption of labour. Insight 15. Demand for labour is so great and varied that many different firms will thrive simultaneously in the early years of disruption. Like light bulbs, telephones, computers, and many other disruptive technologies, the demand for humanoid robots will be enormous. At the beginning of the disruption, when demand still vastly exceeds supply, no single producer will be able to capture all markets. We should therefore expect to see the same pattern that has emerged in previous disruptions. Many companies, both startups and incumbents, will rapidly develop humanoid robot offerings for a wide range of applications, targeting dozens or hundreds of market niches, using a variety of different business models. So even though the leading technology developers in the humanoid robot sector might limit their humanoid robots to deployment in factories or to lease-only user agreements, there will be so much demand for humanoid robots that other firms lower on the leaderboard will still enjoy huge opportunities to step in and target other markets with other business models as well. For example, if a leading firm decides to only lease its robots for use in factories, one or more other firms will seize the opportunity to sell robots for use at home, even if their robots are somewhat less capable. Above all, protect people, not jobs, firms, or industries. In other disruptions throughout history, we have seen incumbent interests turn to their governments for protection against the new technologies. These protections can take the form of subsidies and handouts to the old industries, regulations and prohibitions that impede new industries built upon the new technologies, and bailouts when the old industry inevitably collapses. Almost invariably, the benefits of these protections accrue only to the privileged few who own and control the incumbent interests, rather than to the individuals and communities who lose their livelihoods because of the disruption. To avoid making this same mistake, which could prove catastrophic at the scale of the entire global labour market, we must rethink the relationships between a nation's population and its economic output and get ready to transform society itself. The disruption of labour is inevitable, and together with the disruptions of energy, transportation and food, it could herald a new age of unprecedented freedom and prosperity, but only if we are willing to experiment, to learn, and to transcend the limits of the past, starting right now. As we explained in our 2020 book, it is time to rethink humanity, by Tony Seba, Adam Dorr, and Brad Libby. An incredibly poignant article, one of the most important I think I've ever read. No exaggeration. Obviously, the societal implications of a huge labour disruption via increasingly capable humanoid robots is going to be enormous. And I know that the vast majority of people watching this channel happen to own Tesla stock. As much as I like to troll, Tesla is clearly balls to the wall on humanoid robots. They have vast manufacturing experience, incredible real-world AI, and they are aggressively pursuing the largest ever opportunity since the dawn of civilization, at least on planet Earth. Do not ignore this opportunity. And again, you are going to get disrupted. May not happen tomorrow, but it will happen. So start thinking about that. But before you do, maybe think about some of the potential financial implications for Tesla successfully selling a portion of all the humanoid robots on Earth and charging users per month to operate them. The financial implications from an investor's point of view are absurd. And finally, if you'd like to see my own estimates over the next 10 years for the impact of Tesla's humanoid robot, including when they first begin selling them to customers, what they're charging for the software, best case, worst case, blah, 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 join Patreon at the investor level and above to access my Tesla valuation model. You'll find a link at the pinned comment. Either way, do not sleep on this opportunity and make sure you've not only thought about the implications from an investor's point of view, but the personal implications to what you're going to do when you're no longer that useful. Don't say I didn't warn you. Want more content? Early access? Bunch of perks? Click the links in the pinned comment. AG1 has given me a massive, meaningful boost in energy, allowing me to do a lot more every day, including using my brain more and using my body more. I highly recommend you guys and girls check it out. It's an excellent way to fill in nutritional gaps. It's got 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients, plus prebiotics and probiotics and digestive enzymes and adaptogens to help you deal with stress. Plus, if you click the link in the pinned comment or head to drinkag1.com/SMR, you can get yourself a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 and K2. But don't take my word for it. Here's what some of you guys and girls have to say. AG1 has changed my life. I was, as you described, treating myself like a circus, ate like trash, rarely exercised, used alcohol as a stress crutch, cannabis also. AG1 is what gave me the kick in the ass, got me back to the gym, motivated me to do more for myself, family, my business, etc. Keep doing what you do. Now, I know there's some skeptics, the same kind of people who think Elon Musk is a fraud, reading this going, what do you thought? There's no way that's possible, bro. It must be a placebo effect. Believe it or not, this is a recurring theme. If you give your body everything it needs to feel and perform its best, including having a lot more energy, you'll need ways to use that energy. For me personally, that includes more exercise, moving my body more social activity, and more cognitively demanding tasks, including producing a ton of exclusive content over on Twitter and on Patreon, plus my daily YouTube uploads. The proof's in the pudding. On to another testimonial from a viewer of this channel. SMR, you asked me to provide feedback on AG1. Here it is. It has helped with mental acuity, stamina, and intestinal waste management. Can't read between the lines. Certainly helps with regularity and digestion. That's what the digestive enzymes are for. It has also dramatically reduced my cravings for sugar. You guys need to stop eating sugar. It's fucking poison. I'm 50, 5'9", and overweight, aka a fat motherfucker. I think that's a technical term for overweight, isn't it? Is it fat motherfucker or obese? I can't remember. I average 100 hours a week in the West Texas oil fields as a safety supervisor. Jesus Christ, dude. No wonder you're struggling to keep your weight under control. 100 hours a week. Brutal. It has helped me lose weight. It is not an appetite suppressant. It can help fat people suppress cravings, and motivation to be healthier is critical for changing your diet. Love you, brother. Again, this is a great point. It's something people really don't seem to grasp. If you have more energy, everything becomes easier. It's like turning on easy mode for life. A few years ago, before I was taking AG1, my health was trash. I was struggling to get through the day, had afternoon fatigue. The last thing I wanted to do was either use my brain or move my body. Didn't have the energy. Now, my biggest struggle every day is figuring out ways to use that energy. I'm exercising way more, doing a lot more with my friends and family, and of course, my work output has increased substantially. And you can fact check me. Check out the average length of my videos I was posting to YouTube 3 years ago. Need I say more? And one final testimonial. Love this one. Okay, here's the deal for me with this AG1 shit. I'm 41 years old and not the type to eat, drink, smoke, or sleep healthy, so I was skeptical. That being said, here's what I experienced. Day 1, meh. Day 2, afternoon fatigue was about 45 minutes late. Day 3, 0 afternoon fatigue. Day 4, 0 afternoon fatigue plus extra energy. Day 5, again, 0 afternoon fatigue plus energy, wondering, what the fuck, really? See, this is the thing, right? The results for many people are just almost too good to be true. This is the same experience I had. My afternoon fatigue just vanished out of nowhere. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Why am I not tired in the afternoons anymore? Surely, it's not that AG1, is it? Turns out it was. Day 6 and 7, same thing. Day 8, same thing. Plus, I had the want to get things done around the house that I normally would slack off and not get done. Again, the point, extra energy, you'll need to use it, you'll find ways to use it. Day 9, 10, and 11, and today is day 12. I fucking love it. So however you managed to get me to buy it, I'm so glad you did. Thank you so much, SMR. It really changed me so far. Guys, this shit really works. Just try it. By the way, this is the reason I continue to relentlessly promote AG1. A lot of people get real fucking mad in the comments. Oh my God, snake oil salmon sold out. Oh my God, he's a scammer. This is fraud. But constantly, I'm pretty sure everyone making these comments is also currently short Tesla stock. I'm not particularly concerned about people having a negative perception, those folks suffering from small brain syndrome, still living in my bum's basement syndrome, etc., writing mean comments, claiming AG1's a scam or it doesn't work. I mean, bro, when I get feedback like this is what keeps me going. Just try this stuff for a month, and if you don't get these results, get your money back. See, it's a literal no-brainer. It's an IQ test at this point in time. Testimonial after testimonial after testimonial like this. Get your money back if it doesn't work. Just try it for a month, and if it doesn't work, get your money back. Today's the day. It's finally time. Be like this guy who was a massive skeptic, but finally, after 1,000 promotions in a row, caved in, tried AG1, and has results like this. Head to drinkag1.com/SMR or click the link in the pinned comment, and please, let me know how you're feeling in a few weeks' time. Now, if you'll excuse me, time to put my extra energy to good use. I'll be recording some more exclusive content for Patreon and my Twitter subscribers. So click the links in the pinned comment. See you over on Twitter and or Patreon, and don't forget to grab your AG1. Love ya.